Well, we're on a lunch break. We're here at the trial of Tamara Lich. I think it's day 43, closing arguments by the defense. And joining us now to talk about what we saw today is Mark Joseph, senior litigation lawyer at the Democracy Fund, the charity that is crowdfunding the lawyers for Tamara Lich. Mark, how are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Well, of course, and you've been here for the long haul between you and your colleague, Adam Blake Gallipo. I think you've covered literally every single day. That's the first thing I want to talk about. This is exhausting, and you and I are just observers, let alone being the lawyers at standing up, or Tamara Lich herself. Give me a thought about the fact that we're, such an extraordinarily long trial.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's day 43. I think TDF has been here every day doing live coverage. So, as you've mentioned, I don't know if there's been another mischief trial that's gone 43 days, but certainly significant amount of judicial resources have been devoted to this trial. I wonder who's making that decision, but that's not my call.
There's a comment made by, I think it was Eric Granger, one of the three lawyers for Tamara Lich, who said that not a single witness for the prosecution, and there was a lot of them, had any evidence of Tamara Lich in terms of observing her, having communication with her, having any interaction with her. I thought that was an astonishing thing to say. There was no objection from the Crown prosecutors or the judge. This is, here we are 43 days into a trial, and there wasn't one single person who said, I saw her do something bad. I saw her do this. I heard her. She told me. It was caught on surveillance camera. In fact, the only video footage they have is when she turned herself in peacefully when they were arresting her. She turned around and let them handcuff her. I find it shocking that there's you have a trial of this length and there was no evidence other than trying to divine some, cryptic meanings in her Facebook posts when she says, hold the line.
Right. So it's a difficult burden the Crown has to meet. They have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the requisite mens rea and the actus reus, the subjective intent of the accused and the actual conduct. And that's where the rubber hits the road on all of these charges. And so Mr. Granger rightly pointed out that there is no evidence before the court with sufficient specificity about those legal elements. And all of those have to be established before a conviction can be rendered. So I think the Crown probably will return to that in their reply. They have to have something to say.
I was here for a day last week when the Crown prosecutors were putting their final arguments. And it was quite noticeable to me how often the judge was interrupting the prosecutors. Sometimes it was sort of nitpicky. Other times it was larger objections. She was correcting them. Sometimes she knew the case law better than them and she would say so. And I thought, boy, she's interrupting a lot. Maybe that's just her style. And the answer is it seems to be because today the judge was interrupting the defense lawyers a lot. But here's the key difference. When I was here last week, every interruption of the Crown was to correct, to criticize, to object, to distinguish. But today, every interruption that I can think of was to agree, to emphasize, to add her own ammunition to it. Like repeatedly, for example, the judge said, it's not against the law to go to Ottawa. It's not against the law to call for the end of COVID mandates. It's not against the law to be on Parliament Hill. Like the judge didn't need to say any of that, but she was chiming in. I know you can't read too much into these things, but holy smokes, seemed pretty apparent, the difference to me.
Look, you're probably right, but I've tried to read the tea leaves before on judges' comments, and I've been wrong. So I think it's a lawyer's loath to do that. But you could be right. She did seem to be. She's always engaged. First up, that's her MO. But she seemed to agree with Mr. Granger more than perhaps she did with the Crown. But again, I could be wrong.
I have not been here for an enormous amount of time like you have, so these things are maybe more striking to me. Maybe it's how the judge is an active listener. She's always, some people take notes. The fact that she's chatting with the lawyers shows, like you say, very attentive, but it was just remarkable to me how different she was in her interactions. Here is something that I thought was a very illuminating moment, and I don't want to get too technical, but what the prosecution is clearly trying to do is hang around Tamara Lich's neck and also her co-accused Chris Barber the sins of every single person who was in Ottawa that day, even though clearly there was the Freedom Convoy 2022, like it was actually a legal incorporation. They had lawyers and they had like a staff. They were trying to hang around Tamara Lich's neck any sin committed in Ottawa. And, they were saying, well, when she said we, okay, Tamara Lich would sometimes make a Facebook video and say, we are going to hold the line. We hold the line.
She wants to know what my response would be if I get arrested.
What's the response? Hold the line!
Hold the line.
And the prosecution is trying to stretch that to say, well, that covers everything. The judge chimed in and said, if I say to the clerk, we're going upstairs, we could mean something very small. Again, I think she was sort of illuminating the problem of if you don't have any direct evidence, trying to look into some hidden meaning when someone says hold the line or we this, we that. Boy, if that's all they got, that feels weak.
Right. So I think one of the problems for the Crown, just from outside looking in, is the Crown doesn't have the smoking gun here about what Miss Lich was thinking or was doing. So she wasn't, I don't think, around physically the protest much. She wasn't actually physically blocked.
She didn't have her truck, for example. How could she block a road? She did not have a truck.
That's right. That was a point that Mr. Granger made. So there's no big moment where Miss Lich necessarily physically interfered or even counseled a lot of violent or obstructing conduct. So what the Crown has to do then is build their case circumstantially. So they have to refer to little pieces of evidence. And one of those pieces of evidence they refer to as the use of pronouns, we. They say that connects her with the actions of the protesters. And there was some pushback from the court, I think, and Mr. Granger pointed out that there's different interpretation for the use of we. That's an obvious point to make, and I think the Crown's going to have to do more than that in the reply to address it, for sure.
There's one more thing I want to mention. I was in Lethbridge, Alberta for a few days of the hearings in the Coots 3 case and the Coots 4 case. These are the truckers and farmers who blocked the road between Alberta and Montana, and they're facing charges. In the case of the Coots 4, some very serious charges, conspiracy to commit murder. Now, the jury has acquitted on that most senior charge, but conspiracy just means a plan. To commit murder is the awful crime. So it's unlawful. It's a crime to have a conspiracy to commit a crime. But here's what they chatted about just before the lunch break today: is conspiracy to come to Ottawa, conspiracy to have trucks in Ottawa, conspiracy to protest, conspiracy to stay on Parliament Hill. Conspiracy, means a plan that they're trying to organize, but none of those underlying things were a crime. And so the judge asked the defense lawyer, are you aware of any other case where someone is charged with an offense like this, where the means of doing something was the crime, but the actual purpose itself was not? As in, is it even a crime if you conspire together to do something lawful? And no one could think of such a case before. I just thought that was such a clever point. And again, the judge is chiming in. What did you think of that moment? I don't know if I explained it very well, but basically the word was, if you have a secret plan to do something totally legal, what are we doing here in court?
Right. No, I think you've done a great job explaining it, Ezra. The problem for the Crown is that the purpose here wasn't unlawful. It was to get together to pressure the government to end the mandates. Usually in a conspiracy case, as the judge noted, it's like murder or sort of a mob drug conspiracy or something like that. So obviously the purpose there is unlawful, and then the means follow that unlawful purpose. The problem, as you say, is the purpose was perfectly fine. You can petition your government to do things all you like as long as you protest peacefully and lawfully. So I think the shocking part for me was when the court just asked straight out, is there any case law on this point? And the answer from Mr. Granger was, I've not been able to find any, and certainly the Crown, they would have led with that case if it existed. So I never like to be in a position as a lawyer where I don't have case law that helps my case. That's always a problem, because then you're making new law, and making new law is very difficult, as you probably know.
Yeah, judges want to follow the precedent. That's really the basis of our system. There's one last thing I want to run by you, and it's related. During the convoy itself, you sometimes heard politicians, like Trudeau did this a lot, and what I call the regime media, calling it an illegal convoy, an illegal protest, an illegal occupation. They always said the word illegal.
Families and small businesses have been enduring illegal obstruction of their neighborhoods.
But those things are not illegal just because someone says they are. They have to be determined illegal through a court, or I suppose under the Riot Act, a police can determine a certain manifestation illegal for that moment if you don't skedaddle. I think there might be some extreme cases where a policeman can declare like a riot, an unlawful gathering. That didn't happen here. My point is, every single time you hear Trudeau or the CBC saying illegal occupation, illegal protest, illegal convoy, that's just not true. And my theory is this, and again, I'm just engaging in some speculation. If you've got the political and media class, the CBC Liberal Industrial Complex, calling this trucker gathering illegal a million times, and then you say to the prosecutors, hey guys, go prosecute them for their illegal stuff. And the prosecutors say, well, yeah, you've been saying they're illegal, but as we've just discussed, it's not illegal to protest. It's not even illegal to honk. I think that the rhetoric of the politicians was so overheated, and these prosecutors were given the unhappy task of catching up to the overheated rhetoric, but there's nothing there. I think these prosecutors, I don't know them at all, obviously, but I got to think that they would rather be doing something else, something that's more in the public interest, something that gives them a greater likelihood of conviction. There are some very serious crimes that are being let go because of delay, because court resources are limited. I think that Trudeau sort of tried to speak into effect, this is an illegal gathering. And what we're finding out in this hearing is, no, it ain't. Even if you say it is, you got to prove it's illegal, and that hasn't happened.
Right. It's hard for me to speculate as to the motives behind the prosecution or what the Crown would rather do. I do agree that some cases should be prioritized over others. This more serious stuff like sex assaults, aggravated assaults, and murders obviously should be at the top of that hierarchy. But I will say that the narrative spin that politicians put on something is different than the words used by the Crown in a criminal trial. And I think there was some pushback early on in this case where the Crown started to use words like illegal occupation, illegal protest, and the defense rightly pushed back on that and said there's been no evidence of that before the court at this point, and we're here to prove or defend against specific charges. That language isn't appropriate. And I think, if I can recall, Justice Perkins McVeigh admonished the Crown that they're not to use inflammatory language, and they haven't. So,
well, I don't want to let my hopes get too high. I don't want to read too much into the tea leaves about, Kremlinology. Oh, the judge said this, the judge smiled here, the judge frowned there. You don't want to get too caught up in that. It's what the law says. It's how the judge weighs the evidence, puts it into all the boxes in the law. This is a very senior judge, 15 years a judge. So I think she's at the top of her profession. Clearly smart, manages to keep her attention up despite the fact it's going on so long. I don't want to let my hopes get too high, because whenever I do, I wind up disappointed. But I feel good about this. I feel great about the legal team. I love to see them in action. I feel like Lawrence Greenspan and I think Granger, I think his first name is Ed Granger, I'm not sure his first name, the number two, and then there's a third. I feel like they're really good criminal lawyers, and I just have a good feeling. Even if there's an acquittal, though, boy, they turned the process into the punishment. I bet you Tamara Lich is just looking forward to having this whole thing in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, look, I think everyone involved in the process is a bit tired. And like you, I remain optimistic. She has an excellent legal team. Eric Granger, Lawrence Greenspan, and their clerks and their support staff have been on the ball. No point has been missed. They've made relevant submissions. So, like I say, I'm optimistic, but we have to be realistic that the Crown has unlimited resources and they've thrown everything at this case. We're day 43. Hopefully we'll be finished soon, but you never know. So, yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think it's Eric Granger, the name of the number 2. I just forgot it for a moment. Well, there you have it. Mark Joseph, the senior litigation lawyer at the Democracy Fund, who has been live tweeting and observing this trial since the beginning, trading off with Adam Blake Gallipo, another lawyer for the Democracy Fund. By the way, Adam is the lawyer covering the Amish case, which I mentioned the other day on Rebel News, and I encourage you to check that out at helptheamish.com. But for today, we're here to talk about Tamara Lich. And if you want to help cover the 3 wonderful lawyers for Tamara, you can go to helptamara.com. I say again, over the last few years, I've gotten to know literally dozens of lawyers in this country from coast to coast. As you know, through the Democracy Fund and Rebel News, we've hired so many lawyers, whether it's Arthur Pavlovsky or the Coots 3 rather. Churches across the country. We have dealt with so many lawyers, and I have to say, I actually told this to Lawrence Greenspan. I said, if I'm ever arrested, God forbid, I want him to be my lawyer. He's that good. Of all the lawyers I met, I would want him on the file. He's on Tamara Lich's case. I'm optimistic. If you can help us out, go to helptamara.com. I'll have more for you. I'll be back live tweeting the afternoon.